Hi, everybody. If you're feeling anxious these days, first of all, you're not alone for sure. So, I wanted to talk a little bit to you today about that and what we can all do, but more importantly, why you need to stop beating yourself up about this, and I'll explain in a second. I'm Ricki Heller from rickiheller.com, and I work with people who have food restrictions so they can learn that life and food can be easy and enjoyable no matter what food restrictions you have. And in this time, so many people are feeling anxiety. Not only, I've heard from clients who are saying that normally very restricted diets are kind of being thrown to the winds, and that's totally understandable. And I definitely want to address that at another Facebook Live. But today I want to talk about anxiety. As someone who has had severe anxiety and panic attacks in my past, I know how debilitating it can be. And I want to be sure that you guys are not exacerbating the problem if you're feeling anxiety. So the first thing I want to just address is, I've heard from people who say things like, I'm so anxious and I know I shouldn't be this anxious. I know I shouldn't be panicked. I know that this isn't healthy for me, but I just can't help myself. And basically what the underlying message there is I'm wrong or I'm bad for feeling anxious, right? So we not only are feeling the anxiety, but then we're beating ourselves up for feeling the anxiety. So the first thing I want to say is this type of situation has never happened during the lifetime of anyone who's alive today. We likely, maybe one or two people, I'm going to say, who are over 120 or whatever, and, lived through the Spanish flu. But it is not something that were prepared for or had any experience with in our lifetimes. So this is an entirely novel situation for everybody, right? And I think we need to acknowledge that when something like this happens, of course we're going to feel anxious. That is just totally normal and human. And so that's not to say that you want to wallow in it and indulge in it. That's very different from allowing yourself the anxiety. Oh, I just touched my face. See, you're not supposed to do that, right? Oh my God. No, just kidding. That's not to say that you should be wallowing in it, right? Of course, we're going to experience anxiety, but we're also able to adjust. So that's the first thing. Human beings have been going through incredibly difficult periods since the dawn of humans. And guess what? Here we still are. So we are absolutely going to get through this. It's just a matter of how. And being kind to yourself and understanding that this is just a human emotion is the first step. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge the way we feel and allow it to happen. So here's how I think this works. I'm going to quote the Beatles here, just let it be. In other words, allow your anxiety to be, acknowledge it, and let it ride itself through. It's normal. It's going to go through a normal pattern, and then it's going to subside. Let me give you an example. Back in the days when I had panic attacks, when they first started happening. So I was in my late 20s and I was having panic attacks where I would have horrible chest pains and incredibly pounding, very, very rapid pulse, sweating. And as a 24, 25-year-old, I thought I was having a heart attack. I thought I was going to die. And this happened every time. And ultimately, I was having panic attacks 4 or 5 times a week and going to the emergency room 4 or 5 times a week. And what would happen, the pattern would be, I would start to feel panic and I would get literally panicked about being panicked. And I would start worrying about, oh my God, what's going to happen? And why am I worrying? And then I would go to the emergency room and it would play out the same way every time. I would be examined by the doctors and they would tell me everything was fine and send me home. Ultimately, what happened, though, was I was in a situation where I wasn't able to go to the emergency room anymore, and I had to ride it out myself. And on some level, I must have understood, and I think this is true for all of us. We know we know on a gut level the difference between a panic attack and, say, a true heart attack, or a panic attack and a true threat. Because so often with the panic attack, there isn't a physical threat directly in front of us, right? So we're having those physical responses of the surge in adrenaline and cortisol without anything real in front of us that's causing it at that very moment. So on some level, our brain understands that this is an emotional reaction we're having and that we're allowing it to escalate and we're feeling that panic. But if we ride it out, like I was forced to do, ultimately over time, the severity actually diminishes. So what happened with me was, because I was hired by a university to be a Don and I was required by my contract to stay on campus, I couldn't go to the emergency room. That first night, I had to sit there with my panic, and I couldn't do things to try to escape my panic. I couldn't run to the emergency room to get that kind of reassurance. So it had to come from within. And over time, what I started doing was literally talking to myself and saying things like, this has happened before. You know that you got through this. You've managed, if you feel that it's a true emergency, you'll call 911. And literally just reminding myself that this was a physical response that I'd gone through before. And so if we can acknowledge that we're feeling the anxiety without indulging the anxiety, I think what happens is the trajectory or the pattern of that anxiety is lessened. It's almost like flattening the curve of your anxiety, right? If you think about, or I'll give you an example with our puppy, for instance, who is no longer a puppy, but our dog. She's the kind of dog that if you yell at her, she barks and snarls and growls, and you just know she wants to bite you. But if I'm calm and I speak to her in a very quiet voice, she's compliant. So I allow her to get a little worked up, but what I've noticed is the less worked up I am, the less worked up she is. It's the same as if you think about when you cut yourself or when you burn yourself, right? And I'm sure everybody's had this experience where even a paper cut, but like if you burn yourself on the stove by accident, it's going to throb. It's going to continue to throb for a day or two. Now, the fact that that's painful, we already understand that this is something that's probably happened before. We know there's going to be a period of great pain, but we also know it's going to subside over time. And the same is true with your anxiety. So if you're able to, I don't want to say embrace it, but if you're able to acknowledge it and accept it without considering that there's anything wrong or bad because you're feeling anxiety, you will also be able to ride it through until it subsides, and then it will feel better ultimately. So that's really just the first thing I think is so important when you're feeling anxiety, to just let yourself be human, let yourself feel it, and don't berate yourself over the anxiety or stress or fear that you're feeling. We all feel that way right now. I also want to talk about what happens over time, but what I've decided to do is keep these fairly short. I want to keep it to 1 point per Facebook Live so that we can address one issue or 1 point. So I hope that's a useful way to mentally approach the anxiety that you're having, is to just acknowledge and allow yourself to feel that way. And that's actually true for all our emotions, but for so many of us, what we try to do is we panic and we fight it. We try to keep it from materializing, right? And it's the same thing as if I were trying to prevent my burn from hurting me. It would be like saying, you're not supposed to be hurting me now. Stop hurting, stop hurting. That only gets me more upset, and it doesn't in any way speed up the healing process, right? So similarly with our emotions, if we can acknowledge them and just say, you know what? Yes, this feels bad. I feel anxious. I'm stressed. I'm going to do everything I can to calm down, but I'm not going to exacerbate the problem by berating myself for feeling this way. I'm going to acknowledge it. This is how I feel right now, and that's okay. And you might find that that actually helps to alleviate the anxiety a little bit. There are many more things we can do, which we can talk about. What I'd love to know is how you guys are doing right now. Is this something that you are experiencing? How have you been dealing with it? And what are the challenges you have in this new situation that we all find ourselves in? One of the things I can happily talk about is the whole concept of working from home, because that's what I've been doing. So physically and in terms of my environment, this doesn't feel that different to me. I've actually been quarantined for 10 days now. And for all of you guys who've emailed me and asked me, no, I still have not received my COVID-19 test results. I am waiting still. This is day 4. Well, this is actually day 5. I've heard that it's 4 business days, which would make it tomorrow. I've contacted the Department of Health and they said they don't have any results yet. They're supposed to contact me when they have the results. So what the results are for sure. As you can see, I'm feeling much better. I'm coughing much less. My temperature is just a little bit above normal right now. So that's also improved. So, and as I've said many times before, if that is COVID-19, I will feel myself absolutely blessed and one of the very lucky ones to have gone through an extremely mild case. I know, I can say now, I personally know two people, I'm trying to think if there's anybody else, 2 people that I know personally who have been, who've tested positive. One of them had a very mild case like mine. The other one had a relatively mild case. He's got some difficulty breathing, but he's not so bad that he had to go to the hospital or anything. He's working from home and he's just taking it easy and has a little bit of a temperature. So they're all different ways that people get this virus, and yeah, that's just to answer all the people who ask me questions. So please do let me know in the comments if there's anything specific that you're dealing with, that you're struggling with, that you find challenging around living happily or well with your food restrictions, or just in general in this novel situation we find ourselves in. A lot of it has to do with when you're living on a restricted diet. I know a lot of the challenges have to do with keeping within that diet, and that's going to be my next topic, is just what can you do about the difficulties around sticking to your diet when it's so difficult, just in terms of getting the ingredients you need, and also mentally what's going on up here for those of us. All right, so I thank you for watching. Please do let me know if there's anything I can do or add to these Facebook Lives for you, and I hope you guys are staying safe and healthy. I'll see you next time.